I, 28F, and got married 8 months ago after being with my husband for 4 years. Almost everyone came to the wedding, except for my parents and my sister, 26F. Honestly, I wasn't shocked about my sister not showing up. We've never really been close, and I only invited her to be polite. But my parents not coming? That really caught me off guard. It's no secret that my parents have always favored my sister over me. She's always been better at pretty much everything. She's also way more conventionally attractive. I'm on the shorter side and a bit chubby, while she could literally be a supermodel. I'm not even exaggerating. She even did some modeling in college before she got too busy with her degree. She has a business degree, landed a job at a big company right after graduation, and has been climbing the corporate ladder ever since. She's young, beautiful, and successful, and my parents have always been prouder of her than of me. And honestly, I get it. She's the kind of daughter they can show off. I'm pretty average in comparison, and I'm okay with that. I don't have her looks or her brains, but I'm still happy with my life. It used to hurt that my parents didn't seem as proud of me or give me the same love and attention. But over time, I just accepted it. What else could I do? I tried my best as a kid to get them to treat me the same, but nothing ever worked. It's like they were completely focused on my sister, and I was never going to measure up. So, I stopped trying to impress them or win their approval. Why keep chasing after people who only see you as second best? At some point, I just stopped trying to win my parents' approval and started focusing on living my own life. Honestly, things got a lot better after that. I was much happier. I still stayed in touch with them, though, because I didn't want to stir up any drama. I know how much they care about keeping up appearances, and if I suddenly cut them off, they'd make a huge deal out of it. I didn't think dealing with all that was worth it, so I kept things surface level. I was polite and stayed in contact, but I kept my distance emotionally. And honestly, they didn't seem to mind. They had my sister to focus on, after all. That's how things were for a few years. Then, last year, I got engaged to my longtime boyfriend. Of course, I told my parents and even invited them to the wedding. But they didn't show up. I didn't really miss having them there, but it was still surprising. It's not like they had a ton of other commitments or anything. People at the wedding asked about them, and while no one was shocked that my sister didn't come, since everyone knows we don't get along, my parents' absence was a big deal. They didn't even give an explanation. A couple of days after the wedding, I decided to call them and ask what happened. Even before the wedding, I'd noticed they hadn't RSVP'd, and I tried reaching out, but they ignored me. I thought it was strange, but I was too busy with wedding planning to dwell on it. After the wedding, though, I wanted answers, so I finally confronted them. When I called, they actually picked up, which surprised me, since they'd been ignoring me for weeks. As soon as they answered, they said they were really upset they couldn't make it to the wedding and started telling me I should have sent them a formal invitation. I was really confused because I was absolutely sure I had invited them. My husband and I went through the guest list multiple times to make sure no one was left out. We sent both paper invitations and e-invites, and I was certain my parents had gotten one. So, when they called and said they were upset because I hadn't even sent them an invite, I knew something wasn't right. While they were going on about how hurt they were for not receiving an invitation, I decided to double-check if I'd actually sent it. And sure enough, I had. That's when I realized they were trying to manipulate me into thinking I'd messed up. But I didn't call them out on it. I just apologized and ended the call. I was really frustrated that they were trying to make it seem like it was my fault, even though they had chosen not to come to my wedding for reasons I didn't understand. After the call, I talked to my husband about what happened and how my parents were trying to gaslight me. He pointed out that he thought they were just upset because I was getting married before my sister. That's why they skipped the wedding, and now they were trying to make me believe I hadn't invited them so they wouldn't have to admit they were wrong. It was my husband who helped me see that their real issue was me marrying before my sister. At first, I didn't get what he meant, but then he reminded me of a few things. Like when I called my parents to tell them I was engaged, they didn't seem happy at all. They looked shocked, but I thought it was just because we didn't have the closest relationship, and they were surprised I even told them. I had called them before posting about it on social media because I felt it was the polite thing to do as their daughter. But my husband said he could tell right away they weren't happy. Their reaction wasn't a good kind of surprise. At the time, my husband didn't mention any of this to me because he didn't want to stress me out or make a big deal out of it. But looking back, he noticed that even at our engagement party, my parents were sitting in a corner, sulking instead of mingling with everyone. When he went over to talk to them just to be polite, he saw they were on the phone with my sister, and he could hear her crying while they tried to comfort her. It wasn't hard to figure out why they weren't thrilled about my engagement. Even though he couldn't hear exactly what my sister was saying, he could guess. As soon as they noticed him standing nearby, they quickly put their phones away and started pretending everything was fine, but the damage was already done. I was pretty shocked when I found all this out later, but it explained a lot. My husband hadn't told me earlier because he didn't want to add to my stress while I was busy planning the wedding. It wasn't until after the wedding that I learned the truth, and it became clear that this was the real reason they didn't come. There's no way they didn't get the invitation. I had checked everything multiple times. After they skipped my wedding, I decided I was done with them. I wasn't going to keep pretending everything was okay just for appearances. If my sister was their only priority, then fine, they could focus on her. Recently, I heard from some relatives that my sister is engaged. Apparently, she's been with this guy for about a year and he proposed. Good for her. And of course, my parents are going all out for her wedding. They've been bragging about it online and have already started looking at huge, expensive venues. It's pretty clear where their priorities lie. My sister's been telling our cousins she's going to shop at Vera Wang for her wedding, and I know it's a big deal for her. I didn't really care about it, but then a few days ago, my parents called me and said I was being really unfair by trying to ruin her wedding. I had no clue what they were talking about, so I told them I hadn't said anything and didn't even care because we hadn't been in touch for a long time. I wasn't interested in starting any drama, but they insisted that I'd been bad-mouthing the family for the past 8 months since my wedding, and they were really disappointed in me. They said all the relatives they talked to didn't even want to go to my sister's engagement party, and were already making excuses to skip the wedding. They were convinced I had something to do with it because my sister was really upset that the family might not show up, and she'd vented to one of our cousins. Apparently, my sister heard that I'd been telling everyone my parents didn't come to my wedding because they were upset she wasn't getting married before me. They wanted her to marry first because they think she's prettier and more successful. My parents accused me of making them look bad, and now the family was hesitant to even go to the engagement party, let alone the wedding. And honestly, they had a bit of a point. After my wedding, whenever relatives asked why my parents weren't there, I told them what I thought. I was really hurt by my parents' behavior, and after what my husband said, I didn't feel like holding back. So whenever someone asked me about it, I just told them the truth as I saw it. From my perspective, I didn't think I was gossiping or doing anything wrong. My parents have always cared a lot about how things look to others, but when it came to my wedding, they didn't seem to care at all. To them, protecting my sister's feelings was more important than anything else, even showing up for me. So I learned my lesson. I decided I wasn't going to put in any effort to sugarcoat things anymore. After what my husband told me, I felt like being honest was the right thing to do. At the time, I didn't really think about the consequences. I just believed people deserved to know the real reason my parents weren't at my wedding. When relatives asked, I told them what my husband had shared with me. I also mentioned the conversation I had with my parents, and I kept it casual. I wasn't trying to make myself look like a victim or fish for sympathy, but I didn't hold back either. What I didn't expect was how quickly word spread. Now, pretty much everyone in the family knows my parents skipped my wedding because they didn't want my sister to feel bad about them being there. To them, she was always the priority. On top of that, they tried to make me believe I'd somehow forgotten to invite them, which wasn't true. Even though my parents haven't said anything directly to me, my relatives have decided they don't want to go to my sister's wedding. They don't want to be involved with my parents anymore. The cousin who told my sister about all of this had overheard her talking about it for a while. This cousin loves drama, so I'm not surprised she passed the information along. I'm pretty sure she just wanted to stir things up and watch it all unfold. And she got what she wanted because my parents are really upset. They think I deliberately sabotaged them and that I'm jealous of my sister. They believe I spread these rumors on purpose to make them look like the bad guys. But that's not how I see it. I was just being honest about what happened. They claimed that my husband completely made up the whole story, that nothing like that actually happened, and even suggested that I intentionally didn't invite them just so I could play the victim and make them look bad in front of our relatives. I don't believe any of that. I'm confident my husband was honest with me, and I'm sure I did send them the invitations. What's bothering me, though, is that because of what I told my relatives, they've now decided not to go to my sister's wedding. So, am I in the wrong for telling my family the real reason my parents didn't come to my wedding? Edit. My sister and I have never really gotten along, and there are a lot of reasons for that. The main one is that she's always trying to make me feel small. It's not enough for her that our parents already favor her over me. She wants to make sure I know it all the time. I don't know why she's like this, but ever since we were kids, she's gone out of her way to rub her successes in my face. It's not like I didn't notice she was more successful than me. She was always at the top of her class, great at sports and super popular. But instead of just being happy with that, She felt the need to make snarky comments and put me down constantly. She even had her little group of friends, who were younger than me, try to bully me every day. I never made a big deal out of it because, honestly, I didn't think they were worth my time. They were annoying, sure, but I didn't let it bother me too much. As for my sister, I kept hoping she'd grow out of this childish behavior, but she never did. Even as an adult, she kept making jokes at my expense, taking digs at me, and just generally being mean. It got so bad that I started avoiding family events just to steer clear of her. I'm not someone who likes to stir up drama. I usually avoid confrontation and prefer to stay away from people I don't get along with. So, for the past few years, I've only gone to family events when I absolutely had to. If it's something small, I usually skip it because I just don't want to deal with my sister. That's why I don't have a good relationship with her, and honestly, I don't feel bad about it. It's not like I didn't try to get along with her when we were younger. I really did. But there comes a point where you realize someone just isn't the kind of person you want in your life. That's how I felt about my sister a few years ago, and more recently, I've started feeling the same way about my parents. The only reason I held on to these relationships for so long, even though they've caused me a lot of pain, is because they were my immediate family. Sure, I have other relatives, but it's not the same. Now, though, I've started to think that my relatives might actually feel more like family to me than my parents or sister ever did. Update 1. Hey, so after reading the comments here, I decided to stop responding to my parents for a while. I realized that being honest with the rest of my family wasn't as big of a deal as they made it seem. I just told my side of the story, and I don't feel bad about it anymore. When they kept texting me nonstop, I finally replied and said the same thing to them. But then they started arguing, saying I did all of this on purpose, that I wanted to make them look bad in front of the family because I've always been jealous of my sister. We ended up talking on the phone, and before I answered, I had already made up my mind to just let everything out because I really needed to get it off my chest. When they accused me of being jealous of my sister, I didn't deny it. I admitted that I was jealous, but not for the reasons they thought. I wasn't jealous because she's more successful or prettier than me. I was jealous because my parents always favored her over me. I get that other people might prefer her for those reasons, but my own parents? That really hurt. And I was tired of acting like it didn't bother me because, honestly, things like that do affect you. Plus, the idea that I should just brush it off and act like everything's fine all the time? That's not fair either. I kept quiet for so long because I always hoped that one day my parents would finally see me for who I am and appreciate me. But that never happened. Even when I wasn't actively trying, deep down I was still hoping they'd notice me or value me somehow. That's why I stayed silent about how unfairly they treated me for years. But now that I'm finally speaking up, they have a problem with it because it makes them look bad. Well, too bad. If the truth makes them look bad, maybe they're the ones who need to take a hard look at themselves, not me. If they wanted to be seen as good parents, they should have actually been good parents. Then I'd only have good things to say about them. But they're the ones who gave me all this to work with, so they don't get to complain now. If I wanted to tell my relatives how my parents always favored my sister over me and make a big deal out of it, I absolutely would. They've already accused me of playing the victim and seeking sympathy, so fine, maybe I am. Instead of calling me over and over, trying to get me to take back what I said, maybe they should focus on talking to my relatives and convincing them they're not the kind of people I've described. That might actually be a better use of their time. But talking to me won't change anything. I've said what I needed to say, and if my relatives believe me, that's on them. I'm not going to fix this for my parents. I'm only responsible for my own reputation, not theirs. When I finally stood up for myself, my parents went silent. They probably didn't expect this from me because I'm usually quiet, introverted, and avoid confrontation. An outburst like this was completely out of character for me, and I think it caught them off guard. They probably thought I'd just let this go like I always did. But I was done letting them treat me poorly while hoping they'd finally appreciate me someday. After a few seconds of silence, my parents told me that since I've clearly decided they're terrible parents and have such strong opinions about how they failed me compared to my sister, maybe it was time to let me go. Up until now, they expected me to fix things because, in their eyes, I'm family, their daughter, and they thought I'd care enough to make it right. But honestly, I'm not losing sleep over their struggles. They said they no longer have any expectations of me and that I'm free to live my life however I want. They even claimed they wouldn't bother me again. They ended by saying that, at the end of the day, both my sister and I are their daughters. They tried to spin it like maybe I only felt they preferred my sister because I'm insecure, and that it wasn't their fault. Once again, they couldn't take responsibility for their part in this. They wanted to paint me as the bad guy, and honestly, I didn't have the energy to argue. I kept quiet because I knew going back and forth with them would just be pointless. If they want to see me as the villain, fine. At least they'll leave me alone. Now that I've finally said my piece and told them how I felt all these years, I feel so much lighter. Whatever happens with my sister's wedding or anything else, that's their problem, not mine. I'm done worrying about it. I'm just gonna focus on myself and move on. Update 2. Hey, so a few days ago, I had that talk with my parents, and today my sister texted me saying that what I said to them was really out of line and that they were super upset about it. She went on about how they've done so much for me, raised me, and been there for me as parents, and how it was pretty ungrateful of me to act like they weren't good enough. She was acting all high and mighty, like she's some perfect example of how to behave, which is totally not her. Honestly, it felt like she was just enjoying the chance to lecture me. It really got on my nerves, so I didn't even bother replying. I just blocked her. I thought that would be the end of it, but a few hours later, my husband called me. Turns out, he got a text from an unknown number, and surprise, it was my sister. She basically told him the same stuff and said he needed to talk me into apologizing to our parents because I was in the wrong. She even said that since he's part of the family now, he can't just stay out of it and let me make a fool of myself. Ugh, it's so frustrating. I was so mad that she had the nerve to text my husband, but he actually thought it was hilarious. He couldn't stop laughing at the idea that my family thought texting him and telling him to make me apologize would actually work. Thanks to him, I started seeing the funny side of it too and managed to let it go. Otherwise, I probably would have lost it completely. Over the last few days, I haven't had a chance to tell anyone about what's been going on with my parents because I've been swamped with work. But if anyone asks or if I bump into someone, I'm planning to be totally honest about everything. I know that's exactly what will upset them the most. I'm not usually one to gossip, but if this bothers my parents, then I'm all for it. And the best part is, it's not even gossip. I'm just sharing my side of the story. I don't have to exaggerate or make anything up. All I have to do is tell people how they really act, and that's bad enough on its own. The funniest thing is, even though they know I'm not holding back anymore and I'm not going to protect the family's reputation by staying quiet, they're still making things worse for themselves by pulling these kinds of stunts. It's like they're determined to dig their own hole deeper. Update 3. Hey, so it's been a few weeks since my last update, and things have gotten even crazier. My parents have started telling everyone in the family that I've been spreading lies about them to make them look bad. They're claiming I'm doing this because I'm jealous of my sister and can't handle the idea of her having a bigger, fancier wedding than mine. I think they really believe this plan would work, painting me as the villain and all, but most of our family members have already chosen to side with me. Honestly, I didn't even have to do much. People have always felt like my parents favored my sister way too much, even when we were kids, so my side of the story just made more sense to them than whatever my parents were trying to sell. Instead of blindly believing my parents, some family members actually came to me and told me what my parents were saying behind my back. Long story short, their whole plan backfired. Now, people are laughing at them and their ridiculous behavior right along with me. It's like karma came through in the best way possible. I'm honestly glad they showed their true colors to everyone. It just made things clearer for everyone involved.